Tyrants, one of the most iconic monsters in the Resident Evil series, seeing their steady progression from their debut in Resident Evil 1 and up until with Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 Remake, where they let their presence be known when we encounter them throughout our journey. But as we get closer to the end of this evolution of the Tyrants video series, let's cover the behemoths that stood out amongst the rest and see where they rank amongst our brethren. Anyways, what is up you guys, this is HeyDeva, and in this video we're going to be covering the Tyrants from Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles and see the differences compared to the original version. We'll even include Ustanak, even though technically he isn't a tyrant, but he does have many similar traits to the likes of Nemesis, Mr. X, and the tyrants from Resident Evil Damnation, which we'll also be covering in this video as well. Anyways, before we get started, if you guys haven't seen the previous parts of the Tyrants video series, I'll leave a card to the playlist on the top right section of your screen so you guys can check it out. Alright, so starting off, let's cover Mr. X and his different versions, starting from the original Resident Evil 2 and up to the new Resident Evil 2 Remake, where we see Mr. X sent there by Umbrella to retrieve a sample of the G-Virus and eliminate anybody in his path, where he's dropped off on the second floor of the RPD station, making his debut in the Resident Evil series. Compared to both the Darkside Chronicles and the new RE2 Remake's version, where we don't really get a cutscene of him being dropped off from the helicopter, but instead showing him to have arrived at the hallway.
What is that? He just come through the roof?
Having him rush towards our characters, slapping zombies to the side in his pursuit of both Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield.
It's coming after us!
Which is comparable to the new RE2 Remake's version, where we see him slam zombies to the side as well. But as we look back at the original Resident Evil 2, we can truly appreciate that this version of Mr. X has truly set the foundation that would make not only his later iterations, but also the other tyrants in the series as a true menacing force, showcasing their constant pursuit of our characters, not being hindered by walls, or seeing them showcase our overall strength. With some examples with Mr. X, was when we see him break through walls, lifting up characters with one arm, or when we finally see him in his Super Tyrant transformation after falling into a pool of magma, now engulfed in flames and showcasing his new double claws. Where in Darkside Chronicles, we see him with the exact same mutation, but has added so much to his overall gameplay and battle mechanics, making him a force to be reckoned with, which is exemplified when he's able to move a stalled train towards our characters. Or when we see him show how menacing he was when he would stalk our characters around their environment, showing his versatility with his ability to jump from place to place, darting around that makes it hard for us to hit him. Which this speed can be compared to his version in the original Resident Evil 2, where after transforming into his Super Tyrant transformation, he goes from only walking throughout most of the game to almost blitzing from one side of the battle arena to up close to our characters during the boss battle. But what I found great in this Darkside Chronicles version of Mr. X's Super Tyrant transformation was his ability to deflect rocket launcher shots at close range. But these same attributes can be seen in the new Resident Evil 2 Remake, where the Super Tyrant can be seen blitzing from one end of the platform to the other, lunging up in the air and slamming down on the ground. But his most devastating move in this version happens when he gives off a massive roar and proceeds to run towards our characters, doing an instant kill attack. Overall, Mr. X was a challenge, regardless of which version of Resident Evil 2 we played against him in, giving us an early taste of what a tyrant can do, which is only magnified by the next behemoth that we're going to be talking about, Nemesis. Who made his debut in Resident Evil 3, where at first we only get some hints of who he is and what his goals were when we bump into Brad, one of the surviving STARS members from Resident Evil 1.
They do. Listen, he's coming for us. We're both gonna die.
What are you saying?
You'll see. He's after STARS members. There's no escape.
But after moving forward in the game for a short bit, we find Jill Valentine finally making it to the RPD station, but is soon ambushed by Nemesis, killing Brad in the process. But this tire's overall goal was to eliminate the remaining STARS members, which is an unfortunate situation that Jill has to be in. Where with Nemesis, we see the basic foundation that was laid by Mr. X from Resident Evil 2, but it's ramped up to a whole new level because Nemesis is able to follow us from one area to the next, but is also able to run at us at full speed, much faster than our characters, giving that constant tension throughout Resident Evil 3. He's also seen being able to grab a hold of our characters, throwing us to the side, which causes Jill to stagger, putting us in a situation where he can do his instant kill move, eliminating our characters in a similar fashion like he did with Brad. But that doesn't end there, because for the first time we see a BOW use weaponry, more specifically a rocket launcher, using it for his long-range attacks, and even playing a pivotal role in taking down an escape helicopter at the clock tower area. But with all his gameplay mechanics, Nemesis in his base form would add more to the table when he mutates into his second form. Now without his trenchcoat limiter, it's now showcasing his tentacles throughout his body, using it to his advantage when going up against our protagonist, where he can use it to either drag us closer towards him, or use it to flail us around like a rag doll. We even saw him use it to infect Jill with the T-virus as well. Anyways, with this form overall shows that Nemesis can do almost all of his previous moves, but added the dynamic of using his tentacles during the boss battle, making things a bit more challenging. But by the end of Resident Evil 3, we see Nemesis become a large mound of flesh, crawling on the ground and spitting acid from afar, after being dealt with so much damage throughout the game. But we have to give credit to Nemesis that his overall resiliency is truly shown, especially after seeing him go through the wear and tear of all the boss encounters with him. With the perfect example was that he was able to take a couple of railgun shots at close range, and even then it was still not enough to completely put him down.
Stars, I'll give you stars.
But this overall resiliency and constant pursuit of our characters would also be seen with the next monster that we're going to be covering, which is Ustanok from Resident Evil 6, who was seen to take everything that Nemesis has done from RE3, but in much grander scale, almost parallel to how Nemesis was upgraded from Mr. X's foundation from the original Resident Evil 2. Anyways, going back to Ustanok, our first encounter with him happens early in Sherry and Jake's campaign, where we see him rushing through the tunnel, slamming the Juavo in his way until he finally reveals himself to us for the first time. Which I'll be completely honest, his intro was a great start with this monster overall, especially when he uses the Juavo as a way to rain himself with blood, establishing that he's going to be a constant terror throughout our journey in RE6, which happens quite frequently.
Okay, we go with your plan.
Where he displays his speed when chasing after our protagonist, or to the way he uses his different arms for certain situations that would help him be in an advantage. With a perfect example of this was when we see him use a minigun of some sorts, shooting at us from afar while jumping from helicopter to helicopter. But what I loved about Ustanok is the way he tracks our characters down, where he displays this trait when he uses some bat-like BOWs and have them detect our protagonist for him, which in turn would have him sprint towards our last known location, with the only way to keep ourselves alive was to hide inside some dumpsters.
those bugs.
But of course, if we make a mistake and are not able to hide soon enough, then unfortunately for us, this may happen. Anyways, as we continue to progress through Resident Evil 6, Usana continues to show his resiliency, in both in terms of durability when taking damage from the many weapons and equipments that we use, to the way he's able to follow us to the very end, where right after falling into a pool of magma, we again see him still alive, continuing his hunt for Sherry and Jake. So overall, even if this monster isn't technically considered a tyrant, he still retains so many properties that are similar to one, almost embodying himself as a spiritual successor to the tyrants that came right before him, applying all the things that made them terrifying, but putting his own action-packed twist to it that helps make Resident Evil 6 almost a large cinematic adventure. Anyways, talking about cinematic adventures, the Resident Evil series has been known to produce some side stories that would follow some of our best known protagonists, in which in this case it would be Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil Damnation, where in that movie we were treated some of the best examples as to why a tyrant was so terrifying when facing against them. Which happens at the very start of their appearance, as we watch them walk heads above our protagonists, having those paranoia-inducing footsteps like Mr. X had in the new Resident Evil 2 remake. But this time, each of those footsteps almost made you feel their magnitude and weight when we hear them, having that sound effect of a walking mass, with the added metallic sound that really extenuated each of those steps. As we move on in the movie, we get to see these hulking behemoths work alongside with another tyrant as they chase after our protagonists, showcasing their endless pursuit of our characters while at the same time displaying their brute strength. But this of course would only be a prelude to their ultimate transformation, which happens after their release from their trenchcoat limiter and is now able to mutate into their super tyrant transformation. Which bears a large resemblance to Mr. X's base form transformation into his Super Tyrant mutation as well, where this time, we still see the Tyrant continue his rampage against Leon, being able to deflect rocket launcher shots and also stopping a tank dead on its tracks, which in a way is a feat on its own right. With the only way we saw these tyrants finally killed was when they either got shot point blank with a tank or being rained upon with bullets from an aircraft fighter. But regardless of how they meet their end, each of these tyrants from Resident Evil Damnation really showed their worth, displaying to us what the potential of a BOW can do at their peak performance. But as we move on to our last tyrant in this video, we're gonna actually go back in time with the storyline and showcase the tyrant from Resident Evil Code Veronica. Where we see Claire Redfield again facing another of these behemoths as she tries to escape Rockford Island, having this tyrant in her way because both versions of this monster show to be a large obstacle for us to overcome, which is highlighted when we have our final encounter with him inside the airplane cargo area, where he showcases his many standard tyrant abilities that we've seen from his previous brethren, which included him slashing away at our characters, to his way of slamming towards the ground and having the whole plane rumble with his sheer power. But his most notable moments in both versions was his ability to stop a cargo freight from pushing him off the plane, which this had me breathless for a brief second, hoping to see him finally push off the edge, but to my dismay he pushes it right back towards us. Or he'll do this in Darkside Chronicles. This tyrant overall was a challenging but fun boss battle, making sure to be that obstacle that we had to get over so that we can finally move on with our journey in Code Veronica. But before we end with this tyrant, let's take a look and just admire how this monster can withstand a direct missile launch for a short while in Darkside Chronicles. because after seeing this moment, even though he did eventually meet his end, it was still mesmerizing to see this tyrant hold his ground against such a force, extenuating the fact that these BOWs really needed to be taken down by using some of the larger arsenal that's available. Anyways, after covering a lot of these monsters in the Resident Evil series, it's great to see the evolution of the tyrants pave its way towards Mr. X in the new Resident Evil 2 remake, delivering to us RE fans a potential what a remake of one of these behemoths can do in today's gaming climate, which makes me hyped for a Resident Evil 3 remake, seeing Nemesis in a whole new level. Anyways, who was your favorite tyrant in this video and why? Please let me know in the comment section down below. Also, if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell icon so you guys can be notified when I upload my next video. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching my Evolution of the Tyrants video part 4, and as always, you guys have a great rest of your day, and this is Hey Deva, signing out.